Have you ever stared at a number and felt it was laughing at you? It was a rainy Tuesday in Seattle, one of those bone-deep gray days where even the streetlights looked tired. I had just logged into the company's payroll portal to double-check a minor expense reimbursement when the number hit me like a brick to the chest. My salary, after 12 years of loyalty, 14-hour workdays, and missed holidays, had been slashed by 27%. No warning. No explanation, just a new reality staring back at me in black and white. I scrolled down 3 times, thinking it had to be a glitch. I even refreshed the page, like somehow the system would suddenly apologize and fix itself. It didn't. My throat tightened. My hands trembled. I grabbed the printout and marched up 3 floors to the executive wing, my heels clicking against the tile with more anger than rhythm. Garrett Lowell, the new CEO, sat behind a sleek glass desk, laughing at something on his phone while sipping a $7 latte the intern probably fetched for him. He looked up at me the way someone might glance at a waiter delivering the wrong meal. "Olivia," he said, tone casual, smile empty. "Something on your mind?" I handed him the paper. "Can you explain this?" He barely glanced at it before leaning back in his leather chair. "Ah, yes. That's part of the new compensation restructuring. Nothing personal, just aligning things with market standards." "I wasn't consulted," I said, keeping my voice even. "This is nearly a third of my income." "If it's not working for you," he said, standing to straighten his cufflinks, "you're always free to leave." That was the moment it stopped being confusing. It was crystal clear now. This wasn't a mistake. It was a message. I walked out of his office in a daze. 12 years. 12 years of being the first in, last out, the one who stayed through client meltdowns, who ran entire projects solo when budgets were cut mid-cycle. I wasn't flashy. I didn't play politics. But I delivered. And for a long time that had been enough. Until now, back at my desk, I pulled open the bottom drawer and reached past old project notebooks and thank you cards from clients. My fingers touched smooth black lacquer, the fountain pen my father gave me the year before he died. He had been forced out too. 30 years at a manufacturing firm, only to be downsized 1 week before retirement. I remembered the night he came home, sat at the kitchen table without touching his food, and whispered, "I gave them everything." That night I had made a silent promise. No one would ever take that much from me and walk away clean. I held the pen tight in my hand now, the metal warm, from memory. Not this time. Not this woman. Not this ending. The decay wasn't sudden. That's what made it worse. It was subtle, methodical, almost polite. It began the following week. When I walked into the Monday morning strategy meeting, a meeting I had led for over 5 years, and found my name missing from the printed agenda. Tyler Griggs, the so-called strategic consultant recently brought in, was now listed as the facilitator. I wasn't even on the schedule. No one made eye contact when I took a seat near the back. No one asked for my input. The next day, I received a company-wide memo outlining department role updates. My name didn't appear once. On Wednesday, the CTO forwarded a client issue that fell squarely in my domain to someone I had once trained fresh out of grad school. She replied with a cheery, "Thanks, I'll handle it," and CC'd Tyler. Not me. By Friday, I found myself moved from my sunlit corner office to a desk jammed between 2 interns near the copier. My nameplate was gone. My new workspace had a flickering overhead light that buzzed just enough to make you question your sanity. No one said it out loud, but the message rang clear. You don't belong here anymore. But they wouldn't fire me. No, that would mean severance, legal risk, bad optics. They wanted me to do the dirty work myself, to pack up quietly and vanish without fanfare. I didn't. I showed up every day, 10 minutes early like I always had. I triple-checked every client deliverable. I responded to every email with my usual precision and grace, not because I believed it would save me, but because it reminded me that I still held control over something. even if it was just my own standard of integrity. Still, the air around me thickened. Colleagues I had coached for years started avoiding me in the halls. Conversations stopped when I entered a room. Slack messages dried up. Even casual, "How was your weekend?" pleasantries evaporated. It was as if I had become radioactive. Then came the worst insult, the request to train Tyler. The email landed in my inbox at 6:17 p.m. on a Friday. "Olivia, can you provide onboarding support to Tyler regarding legacy client structures? Let's keep the transition smooth. Thanks." Legacy. That was the word they used. Like I was an outdated file in a forgotten cabinet. Monday morning, I sat with Tyler across from the big touch screen in the conference room. He wore confidence like cologne, too much of it choking and artificial. "Let's keep this high level," he said, barely glancing up from his phone. "No need for the old school stuff." I stared at him for a second too long, then nodded slowly. "Sure, high level." He didn't notice the way I clenched my jaw or how my hands stayed locked together under the table, steadying a tremor I didn't want to show. By noon, I had reached my limit. I slipped out during lunch, climbed the narrow stairwell to the rooftop, a space most employees forgot existed. The wind was sharp, biting against my skin. Seattle's skies stretched heavy and gray above me. I took the fountain pen from my coat pocket, the one that still carried the ghost of my father's last days. I gripped it so tightly, it left a red groove in my palm. They were trying to do the same thing to me that had been done to him. Quiet erasure. But I wasn't going quietly. I looked out over the city, the drizzle clinging to my lashes, and I whispered through gritted teeth, "You picked the wrong woman." I came back down from the rooftop changed. Not in some cinematic blaze of fire and vengeance. No, it was quieter than that. Colder. Focused. I sat back at my desk, the buzz of the fluorescent light above me now oddly comforting in its consistency. Everything else had shifted, my title, my respect, even my identity within the company, but that light? It flickered just the same, refusing to be fixed. Just like them. I opened Tyler's onboarding spreadsheet, stared at it for a full minute, then opened a second browser tab, one the company's IT monitoring wouldn't flag. I began typing into a search bar I hadn't used in years. Washington State, whistleblower protections. Employee rights during restructuring. Unauthorized use of digital signatures. My heart was pounding, but my fingers moved with mechanical precision. Over the past month, I'd noticed something off in the financial workflows, vendor approvals I didn't remember signing, payment authorizations where my name showed up but no memory followed. At first, I'd blamed the stress, the exhaustion, but now I wasn't so sure. Just then, a soft knock landed on the edge of my desk. I turned. It was Nina Patel, junior accountant, barely a year into the company, always polite, always quiet. She looked over her shoulder, then leaned in slightly and slid me a sticky note. For words. No punctuation. No context. Just, "Check vendor invoice web 86. I looked up at her, but she was already walking away, blending back into the humming office like nothing had happened. But something had. The wind had shifted. That evening, I waited until most of the floor had cleared out. Friday happy hour was a good time for ghosts to work. I pulled up the invoice Nina had flagged. At first glance, it was nothing. $18,500 for operational consulting, linked to a recently restructured client account. The vendor name, Cortiva Consulting. I didn't recognize it, but at the bottom of the invoice in sleek digital script was my name. Olivia Hart, authorized digital signature on file. Only I never signed it. I opened the internal vendor log and traced the approval path. It was tied to my user credentials, time-stamped during a week I was out sick with a doctor's note and prescription records to prove it. A chill rippled down my spine. I searched Cortiva Consulting across the company's vendor history. 3 other payments appeared, all within the past 6 months, totaling over $87,000. Each one approved by me. each one tied to client files I had either led or recently been removed from. I sat there for a long moment, eyes dry, mouth bitter. They weren't just pushing me out. They were laundering money and using my name to do it. I was the perfect scapegoat, respected, tenured. A little too quiet, a little too isolated lately. If an audit came, and it would, I'd be the one holding the bag. Garrett would walk away smiling. Tyler would stay clean. And I'd be remembered as the legacy employee who cracked under pressure and fudged the numbers on her way out. No, not this time. I copied everything. Every invoice, every approval log, every login trail. I backed them up twice, once on a flash drive hidden behind the photo frame of my dog, and once to a secure, encrypted cloud account I hadn't used since graduate school. Then I sat still, hands folded, and breathed through the storm gathering inside my chest. I wasn't just going to survive this. I was going to unmake them from the inside out. Monday morning arrived with the usual fog rolling over the sound and the bitter scent of burnt office coffee filling the break room. I brought Nina a cappuccino and left it gently on her desk without saying a word. She looked up at me, just for a moment, and gave a subtle nod. No smiles, no pleasantries, just acknowledgement. We both knew. Over the weekend, I had gone deeper, digging through every archived approval, every audit trail where my name had appeared without consent. The further I went, the more rot I found. At least 2 other vendors, Lyric Partners and InventForge Consulting, had been paid through the same pattern, vague service descriptions, inflated amounts, and my digital signature acting as the final stamp. The totals crossed 6 figures, all within the past year, all tied to accounts I had either managed or had been suddenly removed from. There was no longer any doubt. This wasn't incompetence. It was criminal. Worse, it was strategic. I met with a labor attorney that afternoon. Her name was Marcia Delgado, sharp as a scalpel, calm as still water. She didn't flinch when I laid out my evidence, just tapped her fingers against her notepad as she listened. After I walked her through the final forged invoice, she looked me dead in the eye and said, "They're laundering funds under your profile. That's not just unethical, it's prosecutable." I didn't speak. I just nodded. Marcia leaned in slightly. "Don't confront them. Not yet. Let them think they're winning. The more confident they get, the sloppier they'll become." It wasn't what I wanted to hear, but it was what I needed to. So I smiled in meetings, trained Tyler like a dutiful employee, nodded politely when Garrett tossed me fake compliments in passing. I let them think I was defeated, tired, too small to matter. But behind the curtain, I was tracking every move. That week, Tyler forwarded me a vendor document that looked oddly familiar. I checked the footer and found an IP address from an unsecured network. When I ran a trace, it linked to a residential IP registered under Landon Griggs, his college roommate, according to a LinkedIn post from 2011. A second ghost vendor. Another connection. The final blow came 3 days later, in the form of a misfired email. Tyler meant to send it to Garrett. Instead, it landed in my inbox. Subject: covering our tracks body. Just make sure Olivia doesn't get wind of the Cortiva numbers. We'll push her out before audit season. She's emotional. She'll walk. Keep it smooth. I stared at the screen, heart pounding in my ears. I didn't react. Didn't forward it. Didn't scream. I printed it. Then I printed everything else. A 62-page report, color-coded, cross-referenced, and tabbed. Invoices, login logs, internal approval trails, emails, even backup screenshots with time metadata. I added an appendix for good measure and made 5 copies. 1 for my attorney, 1 for the board of directors, 1 for internal compliance, 1 for insurance, and 1 for me. But before I made a move, I needed leverage, something Garrett and Tyler couldn't spin, delete, or bury. So I called Mariton Analytics, our biggest legacy client. I had handled their account for nearly 8 years. We trusted each other. I scheduled lunch with their COO under the pretense of reviewing back-end access and vendor touchpoints. Halfway through her salad, I asked, "Hey, random question. Have you ever worked with a firm called Cortiva Consulting?" She paused. "Cortiva? No. Doesn't ring a bell. Why?" I smiled. "Probably nothing. Just cleaning up some old files." That night, I received a voicemail from her direct line. Her voice was calm but laced with concern. "Olivia, we just checked something. That vendor you mentioned, it showed up on one of our cross-billed expense reports. If there's anything you think we should know, we're all ears. And just so you know, our loyalty's with you. Always has been." That was it. The crack in the dam. The beginning of the end. The following morning, I woke before my alarm. No dread. No panic. Just clarity. The kind of calm that only arrives after the storm inside you has already passed. I dressed simply, gray blazer, black slacks, no frills. Not to make a statement, just to feel like steel. I arrived at the office at 7:48 a.m., 22 minutes before the meeting I had quietly requested through the executive assistant. She hadn't even asked why. She just replied, "Confirmed. Conference room D. 9 a.m. Perfect." At 8:58, I was already seated at the long glass table, a slim black folder in front of me. I didn't bring my laptop. I wouldn't need it. One by one, they filed in CFO, head of compliance, legal counsel, 2 board members via video call. Garrett walked in last, wearing a smirk like he was about to breeze through a performance review, not walk into a minefield. He pulled out his chair across from me and said smoothly, "Olivia, we weren't expecting anything formal today." I returned his gaze without blinking. "I know, but after reviewing the latest vendor filings, I thought we should clarify a few things." I opened the folder and turned it toward him, sliding it across the table with deliberate ease. Silence fell as they began reading. The CFO's brow furrowed by page 2. By page 6, one of the board members on Zoom leaned into the camera and said, "Can you scroll down? I want to see the audit trail." I kept my voice steady. "The documents in front of you include fraudulent invoices tied to vendors that never went through the standard approval process, all bearing my digital signature. Signatures I did not authorize. You'll also find logs that show internal actors bypass compliance systems, leveraging my credentials to rubber stamp payments totaling over $140,000. If I hadn't caught this, your upcoming audit would have flagged me as the primary violator. I assume that was the plan." Garrett opened his mouth, but before he could speak, the head of legal raised a hand. "Don't." He turned to me. "Have you shared this outside the company?" I nodded once. "My attorney has the full packet. I've also spoken with Mariton Analytics, who confirmed they never authorized work from Cortiva Consulting, despite their name appearing on expense reports." The CFO swore under his breath. The temperature in the room shifted. Just like that, I was no longer the problem. I was the liability they hadn't accounted for, and the whistleblower protected by law. An older woman on the board, sharp-eyed and unflinching, asked quietly, "How long have you known?" I met her gaze. "Since invoice 1186. She nodded, as if that explained everything. Legal counsel stood. "This meeting is adjourned. Effective immediately, will begin an internal investigation. Olivia, you're advised not to speak with external parties until compliance completes their review." "I understand," I said calmly. I closed the folder, slipped my father's fountain pen into my pocket, and stood. As I passed Tyler's desk on the way out, he looked up, confused by the flurry of Slack pings and email flags that had begun flooding his screen. He wouldn't be confused for long. By the time I reached my desk, the building felt different. Doors that were usually open were shut. HR was huddled in the break room. Conversations halted as I walked by. The tension in the air was so thick it had weight, like thunderclouds, right before the downpour. I didn't gloat. I didn't rush. I answered emails like it was any other Tuesday. But waiting in my inbox, marked urgent, was a message from the board chair's assistant. Subject, meeting request. Body, the chair would like to speak with you privately this afternoon. Please confirm availability. I clicked reply. One word, confirmed. Then I sat very, very still and exhaled. The call came at 4 p.m. sharp. Raymond Walsh, board chair of Argent Edge Financial Systems, was a man known for being measured. Precise. His voice on the line felt like cold granite. Solid, composed, but not without a certain gravity that told you he'd seen storms before. Olivia, he said, what you presented this morning was both impressive and deeply disturbing. I waited. We've opened a formal investigation. Effective immediately, Garrett Lowell has been placed on administrative leave. Tyler Griggs as well. You did the right thing bringing this to us when you did. There was a pause, then a shift, his tone softer, almost human. We recognize this has put you in an incredibly difficult position. So I'll ask you plainly, what do you want, Olivia? From us? It was the first time anyone at that level had asked me that. Not what I could give, not how much more I could take, but what I wanted. I took a breath. I want my name cleared, formally, in writing. Done. I want full transparency in the investigation, and I want it acknowledged that my digital signature was used fraudulently, that my career was nearly destroyed by an internal system that protected predators and punished silence. He didn't hesitate. Also done. But I wasn't finished. I want you to understand something, I continued. This didn't happen just because of one unethical man. It happened because the culture here allowed it. It rewarded him, protected him, and tried to erase people like me the second we stopped being convenient. There was a long silence, the kind that doesn't ask for more words, just absorbs them. Finally, Raymond said quietly, understood. And Olivia, for what it's worth, I'm sorry. It wasn't worth much, but it was something. 2 days later, the company issued an internal memo. Effective immediately, CEO Garrett Lowell has stepped down for personal reasons. A full audit of vendor contracts from the past 2 years is underway. New whistleblower protections have been implemented company-wide. Tyler's name vanished from the employee directory. His desk was cleared out before noon. I didn't say a word, but my inbox did. Messages flooded in, some from junior analysts I barely knew, others from team leads who hadn't spoken to me in weeks. They all started the same way. Thank you. I wish I had said something. You have no idea what this meant to us. But the most unexpected message came from Mariton Analytics. Subject, Career Opportunities Body. Olivia, we were beyond impressed with your professionalism and integrity. If you ever consider a move, we'd love to speak with you. I stared at that email for a long time. I wasn't planning to leave right away. Not yet. I wanted to see the fallout fully unfold. But something had shifted. A seed had been planted. A week later, I was invited back to the executive floor, not as an employee under review, but as a potential advisor. They wanted me to help rebuild trust with clients, to consult on reforming internal compliance systems. I declined, politely, firmly. They had tried to replace me, and now, without me, they were scrambling to hold the foundation together. But I didn't need their titles. I didn't need their apologies. I had reclaimed something far more powerful, my voice. On my final day, I passed by Garrett's empty office. The blinds were drawn, the chair pushed back like someone had left in a hurry. I paused for a moment, not out of bitterness, just reflection. Then I kept walking. I took the elevator down, slowly, alone, the hum of its descent matching the quiet rhythm of my own breath. In my hand, a plain white envelope containing my company badge. I'd leave it on my desk like an old receipt. No announcement, no farewell cake, no hollow speeches. Just done. As I stepped out into the lobby, I looked up at the security camera tucked in the corner. For a brief moment, I almost smiled. Not because I was proud, not because I had one, but because I had nothing left to fear. Outside, The Seattle drizzle had returned, washing the sidewalks in that soft, silvery gray the city was famous for. I walked 4 blocks to a building I had passed dozens of times but never entered. Mari Tun Analytics. The glass door slid open as I approached, as if recognizing me before I even reached it. Inside, the air smelled like polished wood and freshly ground coffee. Calm, purposeful. They didn't just offer me a job. They offered me something rarer: respect. By the end of that week, I had signed on as their new senior advisor for client strategy. Not because I needed the title, but because I wanted to build something that wasn't held together by silence and fear. My first act? Rewriting their internal whistleblower protocol from scratch. I didn't post about it on LinkedIn. I didn't give interviews. I didn't go viral. But the messages came anyway. Private ones. Quiet ones. Olivia, you don't know me, but your story gave me the courage to file my report. I've been sitting on something for months. You reminded me I'm not powerless. I thought I was alone. That's when it hit me. This had never really been about revenge. That was just the first door, the fire that cracked the shell. What came after was something else. Something quieter, stronger, more enduring. Legacy, not in the form of plaques or headlines, but in the systems rebuilt, the silence broken, the women who now knew their value wasn't determined by a title or a salary or someone else's timeline. One afternoon, I found myself near the Argent Edge building again. Not out of nostalgia, just passing through. I glanced up at the 7th floor. The lights were on. New faces sat behind desks that had once held my unpaid overtime, my late-night client decks, my missed birthdays. And I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel regret. Just distance and peace. There's a kind of closure that doesn't need applause. It doesn't scream. It doesn't demand. It simply is. The quiet knowing that you told the truth and you were heard. That you didn't burn their bridges. You just lit your own path. And maybe that's what scared them the most. Not the evidence. Not the board meeting. Not even the fallout. But the stillness of a woman who refused to be erased. The unshakable calm of someone who didn't fight with fists. She fought with preparation, patience, and precision. And then she walked away, on her own terms, free, respected, whole.